Hello, my name is Amelia Freeman and I'm a Senior Product Manager at Karbon. I'm going to showcase the new tax features that will help you manage the end-to-end tax workflow in Karbon. The first feature I will show is First In, First Out, or FIFO Queues. With FIFO Queues, Karbon gives you a simple yet powerful way to ensure work is completed in the order it arrives. No more ad hoc prioritization or missed deadlines, everything flows in a fair, transparent sequence. FIFO queues can be used in any service where work is prioritized in this way. To set up a queue, navigate to Settings, Workflow, and then Queues. I have set up two queues called Tax Queue and Priority Queue, but you can name and add as many queues as you need. Once enabled, a queue property will appear in three places: a work item, the work list, and in My Week. To start, I'm going to show you how to get a work item into the queue. On the work item, you can do this through two ways. One, using an automator, and two, adding it manually into the queue. For this work item example, I have added an automator to put work into a queue when the client documents have been received, as this is when the FIFO workflow typically begins. You can also add the automator at any stage of the workflow that works for your firm. If I click here, you can see that I have an automator that says, when the tasks in this section have the status of completed, change the queue of the work to tax queue. So now I'm going to get my client to mark it as complete. You'll see here that it's marked as complete, and now it has been put into the queue and it's the 11th in the tax queue. If you wanted to reserve a spot for your client, you can also manually move it in or out of the queue by clicking on the queue property on the work header here. Now that the work is in the queue, you can also see the prioritized list of work via the work list. So if I go into the work list here, I have a pre-saved view called tax queue. Here you can see the work is ordered in a first in, first out order starting from number 1. You can filter by the queue itself to refine the list down, and you can also filter by the current task assignee, which shows who the work is currently sitting with. So here, if I put in Amelia Smith, you'll see that the list is now reduced and she is the current task assignee for the work that is 3, 4, and 5. Finally, if I navigate to My Week, you can also see the queue position and a filter for the queue as well. This allows you to ensure you are picking up the work that is first in the queue. So here I have tax queue, and I can see that that number 1 is done, and so I'm going to start with the second in the tax queue. Next, I'm going to show you extensions and active and inactive sections. In Karbon, you can easily track extensions and create an extension workflow using active and inactive sections. Active and inactive sections also enable you to create other conditional workflows for any service. Let's start with the extension workflow. There is now an extension property on the work and automators to trigger an extension workflow. Here in the key date section, you will see a new field called extension. If I click this, there are now 3 options: required, filed, and rejected. This extension property can be used in automators to trigger conditional workflows, which I will show you now. On the task list, I have a section called extensions that you'll see is inactive. Each section on a template and a work item can be made inactive, which means it won't appear in the task count anywhere in the app. You can do this by clicking the triple dots and clicking this option called Deactivate Section. Inactive sections can also be made active by manually clicking this button called Activate Section or through the automators. For this section, I have set up an automator to trigger the section to become active once the extension is filed. To create a conditional workflow for extensions, I've also added 2 automators that change the due date and the deadline date to 6 months after. So let's look at these now. So this one you'll see says when extension is filed, change the active state in this section to active. And for the deadline and due date, it says when extension is filed, change the deadline of the work to 6 months after, but you could also do 6 months before. Although these automators have been set up to trigger a conditional workflow for extensions, you can use inactive sections with automators to create conditional workflows for any service of work. For example, you could set up an automator to use the status of the work or task to change the active state of that section. So here you can say when the task in the last active section above or the work has any status, you can change the active state to be active or inactive. I'm now going to go and change this work item to have an extension equals filed so that we can see the conditional workflow in action. So here I'm going to choose filed. When I come back here, you'll see that this task count has gone up. This section is now expanded and is active again. And my 3 automators have been triggered. So when I go here, you'll see that the due date was April 1st and the deadline was April 15th, and now they have both been pushed out by 6 months. Finally, you can also manage how extensions are tracking in the work list using the extension filter. So I've also set up a saved view called Work with Extensions, and I have filtered it by filed. And you'll see here that these are all of the work items that have an extension status of filed. You could also choose required, rejected, or none. By being able to filter by the extension, this also allows you to track the overall status of the work without needing to use substatuses to also track the extensions. FIFO Queues Extension Status automators your tax work in Karbon with confidence.